with 4 more narco cartel boats destroyed this week. Senator Rand Paul calls these strikes akin to what China or Iran does to drug dealers, and the senator joins us now to talk more about all this. It's good to have you back on. I kind of like them blowing up drug boats. I think they're pretty sure what they got and what they're doing here, and I think anything that can stop the tens of thousands of Americans that are dying every year, it's a message. And I know that you're going to say a lot of the fentanyl's not coming out of Venezuela, but I also think it's a message worldwide that we're going to cut down on drugs and all this nonsense. Talk about that, and also talk about what we're doing in Venezuela and your thoughts on it.
Well, our normal way that we interdict drugs is that we board ships and we find out if they have drugs on them. It's interesting that as the boats have been exploded and as we've used this deadly force, when there are survivors, we don't try them for drug crimes, or we don't even keep them. We've been sending them back. So we repatriated last week somebody to Colombia and somebody to Ecuador. So you would think that when there are survivors that they would be tried for a drug crime. You would think we would be hearing evidence that they're collecting drugs that are floating around in the water afterwards. You'd think we'd hear evidence that the people were armed. So we don't know their names. We have no evidence of who they are other than an accusation that they are drug dealers. But we also, in our country, haven't typically just killed people because we accuse them of being a drug dealer. Even convicted drug dealers are usually not given the death penalty. So there's a lot here that it's easy to be angry with people. But if we get rid of the idea of presumption of innocence and we're just going to blow up people on boats with a 25% potential error rate, I think yes, I have problems with that. And
I can certainly understand that. I think if you want to be a pragmatist and you're not concerned with all of the I think American ideals of due process and things like that, we have a serious drug problem on this continent, and a lot of people die from drugs. So this would be a way to really kind of clamp down on it. It might not be too traditionally American in its form, but I also think that what they're doing with these drugs, I don't think that this is really about the drugs. I think that this is kind of a way for them that they're trying to kind of. They're pressing something with Venezuela, with Colombia, with these leftist states in South America, and I think there's a reason for that. I want to know why you think, why are we trying to clearly destabilize Venezuela and push Maduro out? What do you think the plan is? Do you think it's Rubio just wanting to get communism out of South America?
Maybe. And of course, I have no love lost for Maduro, communism, or socialism. I wrote a book called The Case Against Socialism. And in it, we open with a chapter about a girl who runs a gang in Venezuela, and her gang controls 4 dumpsters outside of restaurants because there's such a dearth of food that people are scrounging, eating their pets, eating rats, eating remnants of food. This is an example of how socialism doesn't work and will ultimately fail. And I wish the best for the people there. I have not been for offensive war. I have not been for fighting wars unless we're attacked. President Trump has largely agreed with me. He opposed the Iraq war, as did I. He opposed the continuation of the Afghan war, as did I. He opposed the regime change of Gaddafi that led to even more chaos. So it isn't always clear what comes after. There is the potential that what comes after isn't freedom and constitutional liberty, but maybe what comes after is chaos.
And that's when this first started, I was very wary of this initially, and it was one of those things where I didn't really like kind of what we were doing. The more I kind of looked into the possible motives of this, and you look at the creep of China into South and Central America, we remember what the Panama Canal thing, and the president just brought that up and kind of opened people's eyes to the fact that China is moving its claws into the continent just to our south. Undeniably, it would be a massive benefit to this country to have a capitalist-friendly Venezuela. And as we know, Maduro was crushed in that last election. He just didn't leave. He just stayed in power. And I think it's a lot different. If you're going to try and do a regime change and you've got a willing candidate right there and the military goes along with it, I think it's a little different than trying to install democracy in the Middle East where nobody really wants it. And you got Venezuela that has this massive oil reserve. They have gold. They have rare earths. And China's got their fingers all around them, and Russia too, and it's kind of like this evil element to our south that doesn't have to be that way. I mean, it's not very America first, but it has a huge upside, doesn't it?
Well, I wish the best for the people of Venezuela. I wish them freedom. I wish them constitutional liberty like we have. But I think that typically when it's successful, people have to fight for and achieve their own freedom. You know, we fought for and achieved our freedom, but I don't think that necessarily, look, we tried in Afghanistan sort of to give them this. Women went to school again, girls were in school. These were all good things. Yeah. And within days or within hours of us leaving, they reverted to the Stone Age. They chose to put the women aside. They chose to cover the women. They chose to kick the women out of the schools. People have to want it themselves. We can't come in and give people things. They have to want it themselves.
Is it different when it's a country that voted 70% for freedom and to get away from communism? And is it different when it's a sophisticated, country? I mean, Venezuela used to be one of the richest countries in the world. It's not like Afghanistan. I think there's a little different thing at play here that I think could make this successful.
Well, some people will argue they're for regime change some of the time. I'm for regime change none of the time. And so people can pick and choose and say, oh, this is a better time, it'll turn out. But really, you don't know how it's going to turn out. You don't know what the end result will be. We don't know if it'll be better or worse than what you currently have. And so we'll have to see. But the other thing we need to be careful about here is that this whole presumption, even on the idea of the drugs, people need to know there is no evidence that any fentanyl, any at all, comes from Venezuela. Zero fentanyl comes from Venezuela.
I agree.
They are part of the cocaine traffic, about 10% of the worldwide cocaine traffic. People also need to know that the boats being blown up have a range of about 100 miles. They can't get to the U.S. They're 2,000 miles away. So all of these assumptions and all the things they're telling us, frankly, aren't true. They're invading America. It's self-defense. We have no idea if any of these boats are ever destined or any of the drugs, if there are drugs, are destined. We've been presented with no evidence. And there's a difference between war and peace. In war, you kill your enemies. But for the United States to go to war, we have to vote on it. No president can take us to war without the approval of Congress. Congress has to vote on it. Then you have war. Then you can kill whoever you want. There are still some rules of engagement in war, but it is a much more open process. But on the high seas, just because you are in the open seas doesn't mean we don't have due process. It's not the same as on land.
I agree that,
but we have always attempted to search boats because we're wrong 25% of the time. That's a lot of people to kill, innocent people, 25% of the time, just because we're guessing there are drugs on the boat.
And what I said is I never really believed that this was about drug interdiction or anything like that. I think there's a much larger scheme at play here, and that's why we're talking about Maduro and the regime and all that. I think it all just plays into that, and I don't believe that we're just blowing up these boats because they're bringing cocaine into the country. Senator, it's good to have you on. I appreciate your perspective. Always a good conversation.
Thank you.
Everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmitt Tonight on Newsmax.